Okay, welcome to my fifth Appium video, and I could go in so many directions right now. We've got the Appium desktop working, and it's connected to my device, and it just launched up an app, and I've got several ideas what I could do right now. I've got the, let's see, can you click on items in here? Yeah. Okay. So this is the progress report app. This is the free version, and I'm going to test this. For my first test, what I want to do is I want to just click on the settings tab and launch the settings tab. That's my goal, and I want to get to the setting tab. If I do that like on the device, it pops up and actually doesn't switch when and I've got different selectors here. Okay, so this is where we're going to get into our first conversation. That's about selectors. So there's several different ways to select an element, and one of them is XPath. XPath is terrible. It's like the worst way. It's going to make your tests very brittle. And I've got the source code here, so what I'm going to do is definitely not go with an XPath. I am going to get an accessibility on this element. So I just want that settings button right there to have an accessibility. So let's I'm going to go into the Xcode, and let me bring up the map, or the interface builder. It's the main storyboard. I'm going to shut this down. The app isn't actually running right now through Xcode. It's running through Appium. Okay, let's zoom in on that element. Now this is the free version, so it's the top half of this interface builder. There's two apps in here. There's the free app and the paid app. It's all built into one application, but that's why there's redundancy of all the tabs and all the views and all the segues. And then when you pay for the paid version, it already has the paid version embedded in the app, and it just switches over based on your payment information. So let's try to get to that settings button. So I'm going to zoom in here. I'm going to do a little pinch and dragging. Okay, this is the element, and here's the settings. So this is the button I'm interested in clicking on. Okay, so let's put an accessibility identifier right here. Okay, so we got the accessibility identifier added. So I'm going to save the interface builder. Now I've got the app running through Appium, so I'm going to stop that, quit. Okay. And then I'm going to go over to Xcode and I'm going to rebuild and install the app on the device. Okay, now what I'm going to do is launch the Appium desktop application with the progress report app on a real device here. It's going to be running on an iPhone 6 Plus, but because I set the UDID for this capability set to auto, it could connect to either the iPhone 6 Plus, my iPhone 5, or the iPad. Now, the goal of this exercise right here is I'm going to build out my first Appium automated test, and what it's going to do is click on the settings button at the bottom of the screen. Now, if you look here, there's a accessibility ID on that projects area. And I'll just click around inside some of these elements and try to locate other accessibility IDs that I can use in my automated tests. So it gives you a little more information about that particular attribute. Again, this element right here is only clickable on it through XPath, so I will be clicking on that area. Now, this works a little like Chrome Developer Tools in that when you're highlighting an element in the app source, you can see it highlighted on the left side of the screen so you can see the different parts of the app. Now, this is the toolbar section down here, and the toolbar goes across the bottom of the screen, and as you can see, there's elements for each of the 4 elements across the bottom of the screen. And as you can see here, there's an accessibility ID, and it's not the same accessibility ID I created when I added it inside of Xcode. It seems to be a default accessibility indicator, and it's capital S settings. So I'm going to be using that to click on inside the application during my first test. All I have to do is establish that I can open the application and click on a button, and then I can just go to town from there. So all of the buttons at the bottom of the screen have accessibility IDs already, and they're named nice convenient names, which makes sense based on the type of button they are. Now there is an add button up here at the top of the screen, and there's one at the bottom of the screen. And the edit button is called edit, so that's distinct of the add button. There are 2 of. So I'm going to have to just either make those unique or figure out how to disambiguate between those 2 buttons that are exactly the same. But for now, I just want to click on the settings button, so I think I'm good. Okay, I'm going to get started with Java. First, I'm going to create a package. It's a Java package. I have to position the cursor on the source directory. Remember, I created two source directories: source test.java and source test resources. Source test.java will contain my Java source code. Source test resources is going to contain my configuration files. So the first class I'm going to create is going to be the driver. That's going to contain the logic to instantiate an iOS driver or Appium driver. Second class I'm going to create is going to be app. App's going to contain a almost like a framework for interacting with Appium, just some simpler helper functions that I'm going to use static methods to implement my domain-specific language. I'm going to try to keep everything in App.java reusable so that if I'm doing other apps in the future, it'll be reusable. And then the domain-specific Java file will contain methods that are specific to this collection of apps that I'm testing. So now I need to create my first test settings tab. I'm going to use test settings tab with the prefix test because it's compatible with Gradle, because Gradle doesn't really care about the name, although you can specify the naming convention in the Gradle, and then it'll pick up the tests by the specific name. But it's also compatible with Maven. So if I build a POM file in the future to do a Maven build, it'll also be compatible with that. So that's just a naming convention for my automated tests. There are acceptable other naming conventions for Maven besides having the test prefix, but that's the one I remember and the one I've adopted in the past. So I'm going to be implementing this test in a testing framework called JUnit 5. It's the 5th version of JUnit. JUnit means Java Unit Test. And I'm not doing unit tests. What I'm doing is integration tests here, but you can leverage the framework, the testing framework for Selenium tests, for Appium tests. It's just fine. Now I'm choosing JUnit 5 over JUnit 4 because, well, for one, it's a newer version, but it's still in development and isn't completely released, but I've used it on production projects already, and I'm fine with that, so it works well. It's also faster than JUnit 4, so I kind of want to get that speed. Now, the alternative would be using TestNG. And I've seen tests in TestNG. It's just a different set of annotations that you use in the test. So they're similar. They all have kind of similar meanings. TestNG has some advantages in that you can specify the ordering of the tests when they execute. So if you want to build a test that creates an account, and then you want to have another test that modifies an account, and then you want to have another test that deletes an account, well, you would need those to occur in a certain order. So if that's the type of thing you're doing, you would probably want to use TestNG. Now you can accomplish the same thing in JUnit 5 or in JUnit 4, but I'll just talk about JUnit 5. And the way you would do the ordering of tasks in JUnit 5 would be, if you were going to create an account, you would create it in the before all, and if you were going to delete an account, you would delete the account in the after all, and then you could modify the account in the test. So that'll give you your order of operations that you require for that simple example. Now, if you were going to have 10 tests and they all had to have separate accounts, then you would move the create account call to before each, and that would create an account for each test, and you would do the delete account in after each, and then that would delete each account after each test completes. So you can accomplish the same ordering operations. It is kind of, that's one reason I considered going to TestNG, but I didn't because I found a workaround for that. There's other differences, and TestNG has certain capabilities for pulling in data and having it execute tests across a data set. So study carefully, consider which framework you want to use, consider the advantages and disadvantages, and you can mix them up. It is possible. Gradle can execute both types of tests. Maven can execute both types of tests. You probably can't execute them in the same suite. You would have to have one suite with TestNG and another suite with the JUnits tests separately and execute them separately because they have separate test runners. So just consider that carefully. Or you could just imitate what I'm doing here and go with JUnit 5. And then if you decide that you run into a requirement where you need TestNG in the future, or if you need to integrate with a certain IDE and it doesn't yet support JUnit 5, which is a concern. I'm doing everything from Gradle, so it works. You can use the console runner to run the tests, so it's not a problem for me. But if you need it to work in your IDE and you're not, like you're using Eclipse, yeah, you might have a problem there. You could build a POM file and do a Maven test runner and do that within Eclipse. So you can kind of work around it there. But I'm sure NetBeans and IdeaJ will eventually have runners for JUnit 5 as these IDEs upgrade their tool sets and maintain them. So that's not completely available at this time. Now the framework of a JUnit 5 test is, as I mentioned before all, after all, before each, after each, and then test. Now test is not unique. Test exists in TestNG, it exists in JUnit 4, and it exists in JUnit 5. So when you're importing your class, you need to make sure that you import the correct test. And I imported the wrong one just there, so I'm going to go back and fix that in a little bit. Now there should be an @tag just above the class name. I did forget that when I was typing up this module. I'll add that later. Now I'm going to put in a static reference to the logger library here so that I can print out log lines as the test executes. Okay, so we have a before all that gets executed. This is JUnit 5. So a before all gets executed before all the tests in here if we have multiple tests. After all gets executed after all the tests complete. The before each gets executed before each test executes, and after each gets executed after each test executes. The tests get executed. You can have as many tests as you want. The tests are, that's actually imported incorrectly. So let's get rid of this line. And then we'll hover over that and we'll import the Jupyter version of the test. Okay, so that's a org JUnit Jupyter API test. Very important. The other version was JUnit 4. They have the same name. So let's get started here. So first thing I like to do, as you have to do at the beginning of each test, is you have to create a driver, whether it's a Selenium or Appium. So let's get started with a driver. That would be the before each. So this method doesn't exist. Create a method in getDriver. Okay. So now we're getting started. Now, I like to get all the code into the driver class and actually build up the driver class to be a factory that returns a driver. And so I need to build that out first. And the reason for this is there's a lot of code involved in creating an object, and I want to make sure that that code is all in one place. It's not coded into every test, and in order to get a driver, you just have one line, basically. So you have Okay, so that takes care of some of the plumbing for this. Now let's get right into the main instantiation of the driver and the driver capabilities, desired capabilities. Okay, now I'm going to go out to Maven Central. Got to pull in a new class here. Okay, so these are release candidates. I want to go with the most recently released April 2017 release version right here. So I'll go to the POM file, and same exercise as before. Pull in the version number, the artifact ID, and the group ID, and let's put it in our Gradle file. So you want the group ID, artifact ID, and version number, and that will download it and put it in your project. And then when you do Gradle Eclipse, it'll set up Eclipse to import that library as well. The reason I'm pulling in this library is I want to build an object. So let me document inside of this class exactly what it is doing. So what is the purpose of the driver class? I'm going to go reference some of my notes here. Of course, in one of my apps. The way I was thinking this through the other day was the driver class is going to read a property from the app.properties file. The property, and what would that property be? I guess it'll be, oh, capabilities. Capabilities will specify the name of the JSON file that sets the Appium driver capabilities in the format used by Appium Desktop. And then what I'm thinking here is everybody's got Appium Desktop. They're going to set up and they're going to be working through Appium Desktop, and it's going to create this JSON file and need to pull in all the settings from that file, because why recreate this file? It's just doesn't make any sense. And I could create a properties file with all these settings, but why bother? So that's what I'm thinking. So I'm going to, let's just make this JSON object. And then we'll make this one JSON array. Okay, so those aren't setting up, so let's fix that. Gotta save everything before we try to mess anything up. Terminal. Okay, so what are we going to do? We're going to do a Good. And then we've got good. And then we got our Gradle file. Do a Gradle Eclipse here though. Configure Eclipse. Pull in that new JSON library. Make the red go away. Launch it again. Okay, let's see if we got rid of our red. So let's go over to driver. Okay, those libraries aren't showing up yet. Give it a second. Give it some time. Meanwhile, I'm going to create some of the files that I need for my project. The first one I'm going to create is going to be just a properties file. I'm going to call that app.properties. This one's going to just have like one setting for now, but it'll grow over time. So I'm going to start out with one setting, and it's going to be capabilities. Hard word to spell. And then it's the name of the name that it's going to specify is going to be the name of the JSON file, which in this case is going to be progress report.json. That's all we're going to have in there. Okay, so now I need to create a second file. And that is going to be called progress report.json. Okay, so we got a JSON file. So what we're going to put in that, and we go over to Appium, and let's go down to here, and we're going to create a new session. Only because I don't really need another session, but what I want to do is pull in one of these capability sets. So let's pull in this one, edit. I'm going to grab this JSON. I'm going to put that in my new file. So that is going to be the progress report JSON file. And now, what I want to do is build a program to pull in these capabilities and loop through them one at a time and add those capabilities to the driver and then return the driver from driver.getDriver. So let's crack on with that. That import looks like it's wrong. com.google.json. Okay. So I guess I need to pull that one in. So let's get that library. Instead. Okay, that didn't work. Let's go advanced settings, go to class name. Okay, let's get the latest released version. May 2017 sounds pretty good. Put that in our build.gradle file instead. Okay, let's see if we can clean this thing up now. Now, you can always use Eclipse Save All in case you have a bunch of files that aren't saved before you quit. This is going to be a domain-specific language, and in here are going to be a number of methods, and I'm going to add and build this out as I'm building the capability to do my Appium testing. And this file is going to get rather large, but it's going to contain simple static methods that I can execute with simply typing app dot, and then the methods will pop up with a list of all the methods and the documentation, and there'll be specific commands that I can execute to automate my application. So this file, I'm going to start with putting in a load method. This is going to pull in a properties file. Properties file is going to be called app.properties. It's going to have a single argument, and it's going to be capabilities. And we're just going to pull that in and then pass that back to the Driver.java, which is then going to pull in that JSON file, progress report.json, parse it, and set up all the capabilities for the driver, and then return a Appium driver of type iOS driver, which then I can use in all my tests with just one line of code, which is driver.getDriver. So you'll see how sweet this is after I get it all set up. But for now, I just got to get this going. Okay, so we got a lot of boilerplate in here. It's going to go in just all that code just to read in our capabilities. But the nice thing about doing it this way is I can do capabilities. First of all, I can do capabilities progress report. Then I could have like machine XYZ dot capabilities equals progress bad with names.json. And that way, if this is running on XYZ machine, it's going to read bad with names. It's going to test bad with names on that Selenium slave and or on that Appium slave, and then progress report is going to be tested on a default slave. And then if I have another machine called ABC, I can set capabilities equal to progress report project organizer, and that Selenium slave ABC machine will run project organizer JSON. So I'm building in a little bit of capabilities in here. Also, in the future, if this is running on a Jenkins server, I can pass in a command line parameter that I built in here called test capabilities with a -p option, and I could set that to another JSON file and override the settings in the app.properties file. So it gives me a little flexibility for changing things up on the command line, changing it in the properties file, running on multiple machines in parallel, and yeah, so let's just get to testing it out. So we need a driver.getDriver, and that should give us a object, and then after we have that, we'll do a dot find element by dot, and I want to use the accessibility. Okay, what kind of driver did we import here? All right. Oh, that's our first problem, I think. Driver is a Selenium web driver. So I need that to be an iOS driver to get the capabilities of an iOS driver. Okay, no problem. So let's do that. That might be enough. Okay, let's see. Let's go back here. And let's see what our... Actually, it doesn't change by. By still has only these things. So what capabilities does this object have? Find elements. Ah, new methods. Okay, find elements by accessibility ID. Bing, bing. Okay, there we go. using? Okay, what's it using? Oh, that's probably just it. Okay, so then I need my accessibility ID, which is settings. And I'll just do a .click on that. Yeah, that will pretty much be it. Okay. Oh, one thing I forgot to make the driver use the properties file. We got to hard code it here. So let's do a app.load, and then here we'll do an app.capabilities. Bam. Okay. Testing a lot of new code here. Okay, let's give it a whirl. Okay, that's a problem. Not too big a problem, but we'll figure it out. Okay, let's go over here. Nope. Okay, doc. Okay, not a raging success, but some kind of success. Okay, warning, never reach catch clause. Driver 57, let's deal with that. Okay. Let's see if we can get a clean bill off of that one. Okay, so now we need to add a tag to our test to get it to execute. So that's going to go in the Gradle.properties file, and the tag has to match between the Gradle.properties file, the build.gradle file, and the test file. So in the build.gradle file, we set the tag as iOS. So in the test, I have to have above the class name an at tag iOS. Okay. And then we got to include that. Import it. Okay. Those two have to match up. This is how you control which tests execute. As we build this out, and we have lots of test suites. Okay, we got some type of execution, build failure. Let's make this a little bigger. Progress report.json does not exist. Okay, let's check that out. There it is. Okay, so I didn't read it right. Okay, let's read this right. New file reader. File reader. Now, how did I do it in App.java? Read as a stream. I'm going to try that. Okay, that worked. Okay, first test successful, and I've got to, maybe I could switch this over. Okay, now I'm going to run the test again. I read in all the capabilities file from the JSON file. So it's got capabilities for platform name, iOS, platform version 10.3.2, device name, bundle ID, LR, progress report, full reset, false, automation name, XCUI test, no reset, set to true, clear system files, false, Xcode org ID, and that's my developer ID, Xcode sign ID, this is iPhone developer, Xcode config file, full path to the location of the plist file associated with this particular app. The use new WDA false. What that does is it tells it not to install another app, so it's going to use the last compiled version on this device. And app, and app is a reference to the IPA file. So that's the flash of the Facebook app that has to be resident for this to work. Now this is my app running, and that is it clicking on the settings button and opening the first tab. So it's a successful test.